Whoa, smashing windshields on this channel in the year of our Lord 2024? Why, if I didn't know any better, I'd say we were making a video about... So yeah, I did say a while back that I was done making Five Nights at Freddy's content for the time being. Cooking videos are still on the table though. Yet despite that, and despite my unfavorable opinions towards the Faz books, I found myself thinking about one story in particular lately, especially in light of recent events. And it's a very unlikely story. Far from the best, far from the worst, nowhere near the meme status of In the Flesh or Sea Bonnies. Technically, it wasn't even supposed to see the light of day. Of course, I'm talking about Fazbear Frights number 12, Felix the Shark. Specifically, story number 2, The Scoop. In my full review, I singled out this story as unique among the Fazbear Frights and how it eviscerated the fourth wall with a very unconventional and self-aware narrative. I mentioned how of the 3 stories in Felix the Shark, this one should have been in the main rotation and how there are about a dozen others I'd gladly see go in its favor. I think it's safe to say that Pizza Kit is by far the worst, Fazbear Fright I've read so far. So what happens in this story? We open on Mandy Manson, a high school junior girl who stands out due to her strange sense of style and her pink hair, whom I will now represent with this totally not similar character. Mandy is bullied at school because of this, burdened with the name Freak Show, but she finds solace with the online Five Nights at Freddy's community. A community that, according to the text, consists of die-hard gamers who love the series for its scares, play the games habitually, write fanfiction, theorize about game lore, and love trying to unravel hidden mysteries within the FNAF universe. The community also helps her cope with her never-present, always-working parents, and with the loss of her baby brother who died young, whom she never got to truly know. One day, while snooping within FNAF 3's code, Mandy uncovers a photograph of a decrepit building, formerly an animatronic restaurant, and through more investigating learns that a young boy named Stevie disappeared there, and a suspect's profile was drawn out in purple, implying that, yes, a purple guy did away with a young child in an animatronic restaurant. There might be parallels here. However, this coincides with the appearance of the ghost of Stevie, who rebuffs or attacks her with each encounter, which traumatizes and confuses her. Mandy winds up at the scene of the crime and discovers that far from being kidnapped and murdered, Stevie hid inside the restaurant's old animatronic bear as a prank and broke his neck in the process. And far from feeling excited, Mandy instead feels sober and depressed over having uncovered such a tragic circumstance. This compels her to finally unleash her feelings, reconcile with her parents, stand up to her bullies, and conclude that while she didn't know exactly why she alone found the photograph and was set on this journey, she does know that if its explanation was important to FNAF, the creator would say so. So yeah, not a particularly scary story at all. It has some of the same issues that plague the Faz books before it, and the ending seems very anticlimactic. But unlike other Faz books, there is a lot to unpack here. Firstly, she was chosen to solve the mystery because she too had a young boy in her life whom she lost, and the supernatural powers that be needed a living individual with a similar fate to help attain closure, so that should seem fairly obvious. Secondly, Stevie's ghost is portrayed as demonic and aggressive before his body is found, but afterwards he becomes benevolent. This could be a representation of the spirit being restless, only finding peace after closure has been attained, but I think there's something else going on here. Throughout the story, Mandy is obsessed with uncovering what she takes to be a real-life murder mystery connected to Five Nights at Freddy's. An actual purple guy, a missing child, animatronic entertainers. Maybe this event is what inspired FNAF in the first place? And she gets so obsessed that at one point she considers it akin to the end of the world if she can't solve the case, which is not a very healthy mentality. She is so determined to bust a murderer, find a murder victim, and become a noteworthy figure within the FNAF community, a franchise defined by vengeful spirits and bloodthirsty killers. And the demonic ghost of Stevie only further enforces the impression that she's onto something horrible and twisted and cool. Except it's not that. It's actually a very tragic, messed up waste that was not worthy of such sensationalizing. Real life, as it turns out, can be much darker and bleaker, and in some ways more terrifying than fiction. And it's only when Mandy learns this and undergoes a come down of attitude that Stevie becomes a benign spirit, fully content to have moved on, and he even delivers a lovely message from her deceased baby brother in the afterlife. In other words, Mandy learned to detach herself from the impressions and attitudes instilled by FNAF and come to terms with cold reality. Her tendency to obsess over FNAF and connect FNAF to everything was not just polluting herself, but also the ghost of Stevie. And it's only when she learns the stark truth and finds peace within herself that Stevie also finds peace. If this is the subtext Scott Cawthon was trying to convey with The Scoop, then it might be the most ingeniously meta story to ever come out of Five Nights at Freddy's. The message about the creator only letting on what he wants us to know, thus discouraging fans from digging too deep and twisting themselves into pretzels, is obvious. Yet I couldn't help but also think about incidents in the FNAF fandom's past. From prank calling pizzerias named Freddy's, to game theory's ARG hunt spiraling out of control, from faking an email by Fazbear co-author Kelly Parra, to as recently as the Talbert Files hoax. It seems there's a lot of real-life bleed over from the fictional world of FNAF into the real world we all know, all of it spearheaded by obsessive fans. Just like The Scoop, these are instances of FNAF fans taking their interests too far into the real world, distorting reality and making things worse around them until eventually their efforts are overturned and things balance themselves out. We can only hope that these pranksters and fanatics backed off and calmed down and maybe even hopefully changed for the better, thus making this parallel I'm trying to draw accurate. The FNAF community is a vast, diverse, and fascinating bubble, but it's also self-contained and esoteric, with a thick membrane in which very little comes in or out. And more often than not, when the worst excesses of the community leak out into the real world, it causes confusion and aggravation, the fault of which falls solely on the fan base. Real people with real lives, just as interesting and valid as any other, find themselves at the mercy of the strangeness cultivated by this inaccessible online culture, and in cases where the drama unfurls internally, a similar sense of discord also happens there too. To further this point, circling back to The Scoop, Mandy encounters a handful of local residents who now work at the former restaurant, now a silent movie theater, all of whom have a story to tell. And they're not outlandish, colorful characters with checkered pasts. Stevie's mother isn't some grief-stricken crone with violent tendencies, and the old janitor isn't the murderer in disguise as you might expect from a pulpy horror story. They're just normal people with normal backgrounds and very grounded, realistic characters. Creator Scott Cawthon definitely loves his community, but he's also had to put his foot down and take action several times in the past, even up to this day. Although he hasn't spoken at length about it, I can only imagine the bewilderment Scott must feel at the absurd heights his franchise has reached, and the exasperation he must feel whenever he has to constantly step in. Cawthon's far from the first to achieve this level of fame, but in terms of the property he's connected to, and how ingrained with modern-age internet hijinks that property is, he certainly stands uniquely among them. So, if this story is Scott Cawthon's veiled message to not let your passions of fictional realms cloud your behavior and judgment of the world around you, and to learn to effectively separate your passions from its indifferent ongoing cycle, then The Scoop might be one of the most slyly crafted cautionary tales I've ever read. It's a statement on obsession and perspective and empathy and coming to terms with the world that I think a lot of us should come to cherish and apply to our own lives for the better. Or maybe I too am reading too deeply into it. But hey, that's just a theory. A book theory!